Civilization restarting series. And well, what's to happen? Well, today's part has a lot of expansion. The first nation to expand is this green nation, with them having multiple goals. And they move in from the north and head south. And they manage to conquer this country, which I guess is going to continue doing expansions. With it moving into here. With the nation over here also seeking expansion. Maybe not at the same speed, but they're both seeking it. And while the country falls. Although there's still land fell to one of the sides. And while a peace treaty is signed across these lands, leading to this as an official border. Now, who knows what it actually looks like? I'm just drawing lines in the middle of a desert. Who even knows what it looks like? Well, that's just the truth. Nobody would know. This nation is starting to do well with this expansion. Well, this nation over here decides more expansion is necessary for the strength of its nation. Even though that's not really what it's looking for. But expansion is always great. Until this nation does it. They try to expand into here. As they do that, you can see they didn't ruin the map. So that's good. As they invade. Hard to tell where they're invading from because colors are so similar. With this nation seeing an opportunity as they march into this nation. You might have been like, there's lots of nations before, so why are we getting rid of them? Well, because, well, it doesn't really matter. Nations rise and nations fall. With this nation seeing time for expansion as they go south. And then they run to this nation. And then they run over here. And I'm having future expansion plans, but not yet. Now to pick a country with a good color. Well, this country decides to take back its lands. After gaining strength, it shows its northern former area what to do. Well, they don't listen. Well, these areas are very similar. They also move up north a bit. And then they move here to invade. Well, as you can see, a lot of people have been conquered. And well, let's fix the borders a bit. We now got an empire down here. Got one in the north. We got a few empires. And well, now for South America. This empire starts forming again. As they decide to reconquer some territory. They also decide to move up north. As they manage to conquer the nations to the north. Well, this yellow nation over here decides to expand into this nation. And this nation. Two nations with the same color. Oops. And move here. Well, not a big deal. You may think, but it kinda is in some way. This nation seeing that there's no one to protect them, decides to go on an expansion spree. Well, they conquer quite a bit. And then this nation agrees to join them. They're building strong enough nations to resist enemies. But that's not really going to change the enemies. Honestly. That's weird. These borders aren't the same color. That's weird. Honestly, the borders having every color known to man. This nation also following the other nation and making expansion, which is making the nations bigger, but there's still going to be a lot. Although the purple nation decides to do an expansion as they expand into this area. which they use to take the advantage to invade this area. And then select all, because that's the easiest way to do it. And while this nation decides to go on its own expansion spree, with it moving up, with these two nations agreeing to unite. Well, I like this color the most over there. So they'll unite under this color. And why is there unifications? Well, technically it's still expansion. Well, there's been a lot of expansion. In this green nation, after 90% of the people it sends to do an exploration perishes, they annex the rest of the island. They annex all around it, and then they claim the rest. Even though it made them lose a lot of soldiers, because the soldiers froze. But that was their choice, I guess. Well, we've seen most places except Asia and Europe, which, well, who's going to do expansion here? Well, this nation decides to expand. But not too much, because they don't want to create the situation where they look like the enemy and they get invaded again. So they decide to conquer a few territories. And by a few, I don't think this is a few. And they decide to not expand against the German nations because they fear that they'll... Well, not German. The German nations of this timeline. So not really the Orange nations' allies, I guess. Well, they also decide to continue so they can get access to the Adriatic Sea. Yes, as I suspected, they're the same color. Don't know how that happened. With this nation going back to their expansionist ways. But they're not as strong as they were for their expansion. Well, this nation decides to expand its holding to make it more secure, as it makes a border with that nation up there. Which, well, what am I trying to expand now? Oh yeah, this nation. This green nation decides to expand south against this green nation. Now, I know this isn't even close to green, but like, let's call it green. Against yellow, green, light green, green aqua. Maybe that's the best color to name it. Well, expansionism does occur in this region. This nation decides it's time to invade there. And it goes really well. Or at least I think. Then a counter-offensive happens. And this becomes borders for a bit. Before another counter-offensive, pushing them back, and eventually they're forced to fall with the strength and superior tactics of their enemy. With them having nowhere to fall back on and observe, it's just kind of bad. And while seeing free land, they decide to expand back into their old lands. With these nations being on the verge of collapse, and rather than having to declare war over and over and over again, they opt to do it right away. Which, oh, guess its enemies probably don't like. But what are they going to do at this point? Not much. Well, they can do something, but they're probably not going to. And well, we've seen expansion everywhere. Now, where else? I think I'm expanded every nation in this, like most nations. And while these nations make sense to be gigantic, and some of the nations, as this nation figures out that this nation isn't that strong, so they invade it, quickly conquering the lands. Well, that's interesting. With the pink nation still choosing to invade this nation, even after all the attempts they made not to be invaded. But I guess sometimes invading powers don't care. And they move up here to get access to some more water, although it's always frozen. Not always frozen, but hard to get out without going through frozen lands. And well, that's pretty much all for today's video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Wild Mapper out. But before you go, subscribe so you get to 3,500 subscribers by March 1st. Bye, guys!